that, let's welcome Vic Gundotra.
Hello, Tim. Good morning.
So maybe we should start out just by having you talk a little bit about kind of the scope of what you cover at Google, because everybody knows the search engine, and then there's everything else.
Yeah, sure. I get to work in two very, very exciting areas at Google. I'm engineering vice president responsible for our developer offerings.
Yeah.
So Google gets several billion API calls a day, developers calling into things like YouTube or calling into Gmail, or even calling into our search and embedding that on their particular websites. We also have people who build on top of things like App Engine. And so all of the things that we do at Google to make the web better is part of our developer efforts. And then the other group that I manage is I'm responsible for all of the mobile applications. So if you've got a BlackBerry or an iPhone or a Windows mobile device, you've probably used Google applications like Google Search or YouTube or Mail or Calendar or News or Photos, and the list is endless. And my job is to ensure that we're delivering the best mobile applications that we can.
Yeah, I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times, I don't know, it must be a couple of years ago now. It was about the Spectrum issues mainly, but in that there was one line, and it was I thought it was the most important line in the piece, and they cut it. And that line was, mobile is Google's most important strategic initiative. And can you reflect on that a little bit?
Well, I mean,
whether I'm right or not,
I'm probably a little biased because I have a deep passion for mobile, and I think that the entire world is moving to mobile. That mobile is the most personal of all personal computers, and if you look at the growth rates of what's happening in mobile, we sold 1.4 billion phones last year, a couple of 100 million internet-connected phones. That's more, in this year, 2009, we'll sell more internet-connected phones as an industry than the entire notebook market. And so mobile phones are increasing in their importance. It has a dramatic impact on the future of Google. And so I share your view about the importance.
I was referring really specifically to the question of the open internet versus the walled gardens. Because, of course, there is a battle. Mobile has historically not been an internet-like environment, and the carriers want to control it and keep it that way. And yet, for Google and other web applications to flourish, we actually need it. We need the phone ecosystem to work like the internet, rather than the way the phone ecosystem.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you think back just as recently as a few years ago, if you wanted to get an application on your phone, let's say Google, you had to go through the OEM, maybe the carrier locked down your phone so you couldn't get to it, maybe it was so complicated that you were unable to figure it out. All those barriers have started to fall. And to a large extent, it's been because of leadership by people like Apple that have really made it incredibly simple to install applications that have made the web browser, the real internet, come to the mobile phone.
Right.
And I think the world has dramatically changed recently.
So you told me a story the first time we met about why you left Microsoft. And it had a little bit to do with this sort of future of mobile. Maybe you could share that with the audience.
Sure. You're talking about Tiger.
Yeah, I'm talking about Tiger.
So obviously the reasons for switching companies, it tends to have lots of reasons. But there was a poignant moment in my life when I knew that I had to come to Google. And I was out having lunch. I have some small children. I have one small child. At the time she was 4. Her name is Samantha. We call her Tiger. And we were out having lunch with another couple who had children. And as any of you who are parents know, you typically isolate the children on one side of the table so the adults can have a conversation, and that's what we did. We were talking. And my friend asked me a question, and I didn't know the answer. So I said, Mike, I don't know. And just at that moment, my 4-year-old little girl, Tiger, from the other end of the table where all the children were, spoke up and said, Daddy, where's your phone? And all of us turned and looked because she didn't know how to dial a phone. She didn't even know her own phone number. And my wife, asked her, Samantha, what do you need a phone for? And I told her, I accidentally left my phone in the car. And she said, Daddy, where's your phone? And then it hit us. All of us adults at the table, it dawned on us what was going on. She overheard me tell my friend Mike, I don't know, when he asked me a question. And in her brief 4 years of life, watching her dad, she assumed that any time you didn't know an answer to a question, why you brought out your phone and you Googled the answer. That's what her dad did. And so for her, the phone was the ultimate answering machine. Not the answering machine of our generation, but that if knowledge was available, you should be able to get to it from a phone. And at that moment, I realized that I had spent most of my adult life working to put a personal computer on every desktop in every home at Microsoft. And it occurred to me that there was a fundamental shift going on, and that through mobile and Google, we were going to make the world's information accessible and useful to everybody.
Now, there's something really interesting there about not only about how we learn from the next generation, but also about how phone to you meant Google. And it says something about the phone is no longer just a device, it's a cloud-connected device.
Absolutely.
And in my keynote on Wednesday, I talked about Google Mobile App.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I talked about this idea of the sensor-based platform connecting to cloud applications. Now, I know you've seen my riff on that, because it's basically a result of conversations that we've had. But can you kind of reflect on that in your own mind? How does the phone and the cloud work together? And why does Daddy, where's your phone suggest the cloud?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, I think we have to recognize that when we build software for phones, that this is not the same model as we did on the PC. The mobile phone has some unique attributes, and we've got to take advantage of that. So for example, this device has eyes, it's got a camera, it's got ears, it's got a microphone, it's got a skin, you can touch it, and it knows your location. And so software has to really take advantage of those attributes. And what we did with Google Mobile App, this is the app you can download on your iPhone or your BlackBerry, which we just released for the BlackBerry. We take advantage of those unique characteristics. We know your location. We take advantage of the mic. You can just say, best Italian restaurant in Schenectady, New York. Or you can say flowers, and we know you're in San Francisco, and we'll give you a flower shop right down the street. And so combining these data sources that you referenced, location, Google search, and other things. For example, recently we've added the ability for you to add your friends as a data source. So you can visualize your friends. And so these things are important.
You're talking about latitude there.
Yeah, latitude. That's right.
So, I guess the thing that's really interesting to me there, when I started talking about Web 2.0, it was really, before even the name, I was talking about this idea of an internet operating system in which the subsystems weren't about controlling screens and keyboards and disks and so on and various kinds of application resources. They were actually operating system services for connecting data resources. And we are, in fact, starting to see that data operating system in the cloud emerge. Now, one of the things that I had kind of put out to the world was that, at least in my ideal world, that operating system would look like Linux. And by that I mean that it would be an operating system assembled of best-of-breed components from many, many different sources, versus, one company figures out how to be, as I used the Tolkien image, one ring to rule them all. And I have a bit of a question here in Google Mobile App. All of those cooperating resources are Google-controlled resources, even down to the speech recognition, which is not a field that you were in before. Do you guys see yourself providing all of the system services in these cloud apps, or do you see a role for, hey, we're going to actually build, for example, when you say I want to integrate people, would you say, oh yeah, actually we're going to use Twitter or Facebook for that and not try to build our own Google Friends subsystem?
So that's a very complicated question. Let me break it up into two parts and answer it. Your first part about the previous world that we used to live in with one ring to rule them all, the world where you'd go to a big show like this and somebody would tell you what the next version of the operating system is going to have. The internet's not like that. No one controls the internet, and that's why.
But do you want to try?
No, I don't think so. I think anybody who tries to control the internet's going to fail. That's what's beautiful about the internet. You can, like we did with Gears, you can propose some suggestions, and you can hope that Firefox and Apple and others adopt them in an open source way, and I think we've been successful with that approach, but that by no means is control. Now there's a second question you asked, which is what about the data sources we're using, and why did we do voice, for example? I think Google will, we love partnerships, and we'll partner in as many places as possible. There will be a few areas that we believe is core. We believe that voice search, is a new form of search. and that's core to our business, so we decided to build that entirely in-house. And it's one of those technologies we think that gets better with usage.
Yeah.
When we launched it on the iPhone, in a quarter, we've seen up to a 15% jump in accuracy, because as more people use it, we collect more data about acoustic models, more samples, and our accuracy gets better. And so we want to have that technology in-house, not licensed.
Yeah.
And so I think and we get to apply Google expertise, software expertise to that problem in a new way.
But still there is a question of whether ultimately, don't you find that to be true in so many areas? So if you look at the mapping subsystem, so to speak, originally Navtech, TeleAtlas, Digital Globe, people like that, but increasingly Google building its own data assets in the location space.
I mean, although I would say that Google is doing it in a way that probably no other company would do. I mean, you look at something like our location services.
Yeah.
If you're on an iPhone and you click My Location, those apps that ask you for your location like Loot, particularly like if you're in this room where there's no GPS, Apple calls out, and in many cases it's the Google Cell ID which provides that answer first.
Yeah.
And that's an example where we didn't have to do that. We didn't have to enable hundreds of location-based apps on the iPhone or other platforms. We could have said, no, that's our data source. We're going to keep it for our friend's app. But we didn't do that. It's your idea that you've referenced. You've got to add more value to the system than you take.
Right.
And so we take these services, we broadly make them available, and a lot of times the innovation happens elsewhere.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, you've been great at that. I mean, the original Google Maps success was because, hey, you became a platform for everybody else.
That's right.
Fabulous, create more value than you capture example. But at the same time, there is the question of consuming data services from other. Can you give me examples of places where you're...
Today, anytime you do a Google search for reviews, for example, or on Google mobile app, if you do a search for a review on a particular restaurant, when you click and you see those are reviews that we're getting through our partnerships with other companies.
Okay.
That's a classic example where we don't have the data, but we partner with others.
Do you think more about, is there a generalized way to sort of incorporate more and more services from outside to kind of set that as the tone of how we build in the future, rather than everybody saying we're going to race, we're going to have the best of this and we're going to own it, versus, hey, we're going to kind of figure out how to have standards for interoperability.
So as the developer guy at Google, this is a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. I do believe that we're doing a decent job of providing APIs so that not only can we consume and make our services consumable, but that we can enable innovation. I'll give you an example. I just came across an application this week that's been soft launched. It hasn't been publicized. But there's a television show called Hell's Angels. Hell's Angels? Hell's Kitchens. Excuse me, not Hell's Angels, Hell's Kitchens. I don't know how I got that one mixed up. It's a great cooking show. What they've done is they've hired a developer called Social to You who's built this app where you can kind of play this game. The app is built in Facebook. It's a Facebook app, but it's powered by Google App Engine. The first time I saw it was yesterday. And so that's the power of having your applications and your data available so that somebody else can innovate and bring together things in ways that you never imagined or were not even aware of. And so I think that's what the internet is, the ultimate mashup. Facebook, Google App Engine, a television show, it's great. Yeah.
Hey, I want to come back to this idea of developing for mobile. So right now we've got a lot of different sort of platforms on mobile. We have iPhone, which is far and away the leader in the smartphone, at least excitement meter at the moment. But Palm's coming in with their Palm OS. BlackBerry has got to be there. Nokia's got to be there. Microsoft's got to be there. And so developers are in this position of, how do I develop? Which platform do I choose? And then of course there's the native web app. And when we were talking backstage, you were telling me you wanted to show us something that you got in that direction. Some of your latest.
I'm putting on my mobile hat. I feel a lot of pain at Google that I suspect many in your audience do, which is, if you're going to build an application, what do you build it for? You just mentioned iPhone, BlackBerry, Palm, there's Nokia for the rest of the world, there's Android, and it costs a huge amount of money to build a development team that can do all those different platforms. In fact, I would say for most startups, it's beyond their reach, and they just pick one or two platforms. What's happening now is, for the first time, the internet, the web, on these phones is emerging as a viable platform instead. And so I wanted to show you an app. This app is built using HTML5, the latest standards available within web browsers. I'm going to show you the app on the iPhone first. Let's see, can we bring that up here? Okay, so what you're looking at, let's see if I can center that. What you're looking at is Gmail written as a web app on the iPhone. And it is incredible. It's incredibly fast. I've got some cool new features here. I can select multiple messages. You'll note the floaty bar that appeared there at the top. As I move down, you'll see that floating bar will move with me. It allows me to archive my messages very easily. You can see the starred labels. It's really a full functional app, but it's built using HTML5. So it uses things like the offline cache capability. So you'll note that I'm not even connected. Look in the top left there. I'm in airplane mode. I have no internet connection. And yet, if I was to select a message, I can open up that message. It's all cached offline. Now, this is a technical prototype. Stay tuned.
So when do we get access to this?
We're working on that.
For special friend of Mr. Rick.
But,
right?
but I want to show you, here's the kicker. Look at this. What you're looking at now is, let's see here, I got this, there we go. You are looking at exactly the same app. There we go. Running on Android. Now, think about that for a moment. My development team was able to have one code base using the rich new features of HTML5, app cache, the database, worker pool threads, and we were able to build that for both the iPhone and Android because they have this powerful WebKit browser. Imagine if you could build apps that ran across all these phones because of the web. The web would have won as a dominant platform.
Yep.
And so that's what gets us really excited. I would stay tuned for this, and I think that right now it's a technical prototype, but when we make it broadly available, I think people are really going to see this as the first HTML5 mobile web app from a flagship app like Gmail. Like Gmail was in April of 2004, it was a great watershed moment for Ajax apps. I don't think people realize what you can do in the mobile web because of these powerful browsers. And when this thing is released, I think we're eagerly looking forward to hearing feedback from people as to what they think.
Yeah, so clearly Adobe's been trying to play in this space with Air. We think HTML5 and the capabilities there really are making just native web apps.
I think Adobe is got some great products. We clearly use them in places like YouTube. There's also Silverlight for Microsoft.
Yeah.
I am biased toward open web standards.
Yeah.
And so I predict you will see the video tag in HTML5 become broadly adopted. You will see open. Remember, the internet is different because it's controlled by none of us, so it belongs to all of us. Nobody gets to define what these HTML5 is. No company can dictate it. And so it's an open platform.
But
well, you can try, and in the end, if you don't reach consensus, no one adopts the standard.
Yeah.
And so what you're seeing is Safari, Firefox, Chrome. You're seeing these browsers implement these HTML5 standards, which is so exciting. We're moving the web forward.
Actually, I'm kind of jumping. We were going to go to questions from Google Moderator, but your mention of Chrome makes me want to jump right now to the first question here, which is, when will Chrome come to the Mac?
So we deeply care about the Mac. I use a Mac, and I want Chrome on the Mac. So we're working very, very hard on it, both for the Mac and for Linux. Because Chrome is an open source project, anybody here can go to devchromium.org, and you can look at the bills. You can actually judge for yourself as to where we are. You can submit a patch. It's done in the open. And we're making progress. You can judge to the degree of progress we're making. But we're trying to get it out as fast as we can.
But no ETA?
No ETA.
All right. So, one of the other things I want to talk about a little bit about, and this was really in the context of Google Moderator, was the fact that this started out inside as one of your 20% projects. It was something that was built. Well, maybe you tell the story.
Yeah, sure. Google has a really quirky culture. One of the things that I love about Google is we have this meeting on Friday evenings called TGIF, and Larry and Sergey and Eric will stand up in front of the entire company. You can come join in the room, or the rest of the company conferences in. And after some prepared remarks, we always open up to question and answer. And as you can imagine, most of our employees can't physically be in the room. And so a 20% project was created to create an online, like a wiki board that would allow you to post a question and allow others to vote on it. So that when it came time to take questions, the top-ranked questions, the questions the employees really cared about, rose to the top. That was done as a 20% project. And in time, that project, added on top of Google App Engine, got incredibly broad adoption even outside of Google.
So you actually wanted to show us, you used this for or actually I shouldn't say you used it, but the White House used Google Moderator for Barack Obama's recent...
Yeah, it was crazy. We get a phone call and we find out that the president wants to use Moderator. The White House is going to use it. And at first we were excited, and secondly we had fear strike our heart, thinking, oh my God, we're going to melt a data center. What's going to happen here? The chart we're showing you here is something we've never shown publicly. We got approval from the White House to show this. What you're looking at is as the president on whitehouse.gov issued a blog post that announced it, you can see that first spike at 100 QPS. Then you can see the next day as CNN, NPR, the New York Times encouraged people to go up and join this historic online town meeting with a sitting president. Other people started posting questions. You can see where we added a homepage promotion on Google at 5 p.m. and we got to about 300 QPS. But you can see most Americans waited until 3 hours before the cutoff to submit questions. And look at that spike. As people went up, posted 3.6 million votes, spiking almost to 700 QPS. And then
QPS
of course,
mean questions per second?
It's actually queries per second.
Queries per second.
It's the measure we use internally to measure traffic. And then you can see as the president was speaking at 11:30, you can see everyone went to that board and was looking at various questions. Now, if you were tasked to build something like this, nation scale, maybe world scale, we had no way to predict how many people were going to post questions, right? Well, you have to have infrastructure that does that. And Google App Engine, that is one of its core value propositions. We handle the scaling for you. You don't have to carry pagers. We take the Google scale, allow you to run that app. And by the way, the 45,000 other apps on Google App Engine were totally unaffected by this much scale. And it's free to get started.
So speaking of our own Google App Engine, not App Engine, moderator questions, FDTN in New York City asked the question of the hour, is Google buying Twitter? Because of course, that would be very useful to have that kind of scaling on Twitter. We wouldn't see the fail whale anymore, right?
I'm a big fan of Twitter, and yes, scaling would help there. We don't, as a policy, comment on rumor or speculation. So I've got nothing to say about Twitter.
Maybe it's not rumor anymore. Do we have votes? Is it Michael or is it Kara who's got the story right?
I'm friends with Michael and Kara, and I'm enjoying their conversation, but have no comment.
All right, okay. I had to ask. In terms of other questions we got on moderator, Bob J. Page in Chapel Hill said, what would Google like to see in the way of notebook PC hardware innovation?
Well, I think there's tremendous innovation going on right now in the netbook space. Right? You're seeing these things become cheaper, more capable, and we think that's great, particularly if you add connectivity to them. And so we'd like to see that accelerate. We love to see the cost come down. Mm-hmm. We were talking a few years ago about the laptop per child. We thought we could get to $100, $200 price point. The reality is that these netbooks, subsidized by carriers, may in fact get to almost free. And I think that has huge implications for children who can get access to these devices.
Well, at some point, though, don't they come with a subscription price tag, perhaps?
Possibly, for data.
Yeah.
But I predict that you're going to have to pay for data one way or the other. And so attaching that to a computer is probably a great deal.
Yeah. Alan Noren from O'Reilly asked, 5 years from now, what accomplishments will define success for Google's mobile strategy?
So half a decade out.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill, my former boss at Microsoft, used to say that we often overestimate what we can do in 3 years and underestimate what we can do in 10.
So five is
right in the middle. I really think what we're going to see is going to surprise people. In 5 years, these devices will do amazing things with the camera. What you'll be able to do with the power of the cloud and the camera, recognize objects, your friends, what you'll be able to do with voice recognition. We'll start to get to the point where these devices will become our agents, our friends, and we'll understand our calendars, we'll understand our intentions, will support us with advice. Will take notes for us.
But I see people kind of showing off the cool new thing on Android, where they're kind of doing walking with their thing in heads-up view.
Yeah.
Kind of silly. Don't you think, in some sense, we may end up with a new form factor? I've been actually predicting that glasses. There's going to be a new kind of high-tech glasses with heads-up display. camera,
It could be possible. I do think that the initial attempts at a lot of these areas are considered silly.
Yeah.
I mean, voice recognition in the early days, it was a nice trick, but not very usable. And look how far we've come. And, I get the advantage of looking at daily voice queries coming in, and it's crazy. It's working. We've reached a tipping point.
So, do you share QPS numbers?
We don't share QPS numbers on Google Search. It's growing and growing very, very fast, and we're thrilled about it.
But so we can really expect some surprises, I think.
I think so. I think, like I said, this device is not the PC.
Yeah.
This device has unique attributes, and we're just learning to use software to take advantage of the eyes, ears, skin, and the knowledge of location.
So Mad Mongol here at the show asked whether you guys are going to create a whole suite of offline apps.
Absolutely.
Everything going offline.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are going to be leaders in taking advantage of HTML5. One thing I learned from my days at Microsoft was that you just don't need a great platform. You need tools, and then you must have flagship applications that take advantage of it. People forget that one of the reasons why Windows was successful was because there was Office. There was a flagship app that showed off the power of Windows. We want to be that company for the web.
So what do you make of Stephen Elop's contention that, what Google Docs and spreadsheet shows us is that, italics, bold, and underlining is free?
Well, he has to say that. You notice he forgot about spell checking and a few other features. I understand that he has to say that, and that's great. It turns out for a large number of people, it works very, very well.
Okay, another question from Ken Beagle up in Seattle. He says, from your Microsoft and Google experience, what makes a successful API, and how do you encourage APIs to grow in a positive direction?
I think there's two different parts of making an API successful. Obviously, there's the syntactical nature of it. You do want your API family to have some sort of structure and coherence. Although, even if you fail at that, developers will figure it out. The real question is, does your API expose enough functionality that enables developers to do something interesting? If you get that right, and your terms of service are easy enough for developers to adopt, and you have the right tools, you'll get crazy adoption. I mean, people forget.
So you measure it by whether or not it gets adopted.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate
Do you
measure.
go back, if let's say you put out an API and nobody adopts it, do you scrap it and do over?
Well, if we clarify that this API is an experiment, it's not one we're committed to, so we don't want developers betting on something for their business, and it doesn't get adoption, then yes, failure is part of learning, and that's what happens.
So Oliver in Cologne, Germany asks, what social responsibility does Google have, for example, in regards to censorship in China?
I think when you're a market leader, like Google is, you have a disproportionate amount of social responsibility. It's our job to do right by our customers and by the world in general. I think you saw that in Google's philosophy in its early days. Its emphasis on not being evil, I think, was a reflection of the understanding that we had a social responsibility. And I think Google continues to try to do the best that it can. If we stumble at times, there's certainly things to look back on and wish we could have done different, but I think we're trying the best that we can to take the power of the internet, the participatory nature of the internet, the openness of the internet, and drive it everywhere. In some cases, the right way to do that is by still being a player in the country because you follow the rules of the country versus saying that you're completely out. And so we limit some of our activities, for example, in China.
Such as?
For example, we don't have the ability to log in on Gmail.
Okay. So I know we're actually past time, but I want to squeeze in one last question from Tim Burry in New Jersey. This is really in the context of the economic downturn. Tim asks, will Google Ventures make an effort to help small business? That's a kind of a tough one, but...
Help small business by helping companies who are building innovative solutions for small business? I think the answer is likely yes, but we're very early in that process, and so it's probably a little too early to articulate our focus.
Does Google? How will Google Corporate and Google Ventures work together? Are they kind of an independent? I was talking with Rich the other day, and he was saying, "Hey, this is a real venture firm."
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing about Google is we often try lots of experiments internally and try different models and try to see what works. Our end game here is to encourage innovation, to produce better web apps, to produce, let small entrepreneurs who've got great ideas, give them the ability to take those ideas and bring them to scale. And so that's the real goal there.
All right. We'll have to cut it there because we're over time.
Great.
Thanks a lot, Vic.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Thanks.